Welcome. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on our digital world and explore its most basic building blocks. You know, the stuff that turns a photo or even a whole virtual reality world from just an idea into something you can actually see on your screen. So it all really kicks off with this one simple but honestly pretty deep question. Just think about it for a second. A photo, your favorite song, a 3D model you want to print. How do these rich, complex, real-world things get translated into the language of a computer? How does our analog world actually become digital?
So here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the magic trick of turning reality into numbers. Then, we'll see how arranging those numbers creates everything from sound to video. After that, we'll tackle the huge problem of massive files, explore a totally different way to make graphics, and finally, bring it all home by seeing how this becomes a powerful toolkit for scientists and creators.
All right, first things first. We have to tackle the most fundamental step. How do you capture the continuous, kind of messy analog world and represent it with clean, discrete numbers? Let's dive in. The whole process is called digitization. Okay, imagine you're looking at a beautiful sunset. It's this smooth, continuous blend of colors, right? Well, a computer can't see that. Instead, it takes thousands of tiny snapshots. We call them samples. And for each one, it assigns a number to the color it sees. And that massive list of numbers, that is the image inside your computer.
Now, the quality of this digital copy really depends on two key things. First up is spatial resolution. That's just how many samples, or pixels, did we take. More pixels, you get a sharper, more detailed image. Fewer pixels, and things start to get blocky. The second thing is bit depth. This is all about how much information we store for each one of those samples. It's what gives the data its richness, like how many colors we have to work with.
You know, a really great way to think about bit depth is with crayons. A low bit depth image is like that basic 8-pack of crayons you had as a kid. You can draw, but you'll see these harsh bands of color instead of smooth gradients. But a high bit depth image, that gives you millions of colors. That's the giant 120-pack with the sharpener built right in, letting you capture every single subtle shade perfectly. Okay, so we've got our lists of numbers. But a simple list isn't a song or a picture. Not yet. It's all about how we organize those numbers, how we give them dimension that really brings them to life. The simplest way to organize them is just one-dimensional. A sound wave is really just a series of values changing over a single dimension, time. So, we represent it with a single row of numbers, a vector. Each number is just a snapshot of the sound's loudness at a very specific moment. Now, let's add a dimension. For a simple black and white image, we need to describe values across both height and width. So what do? We arrange our numbers in a two-dimensional grid, a matrix. It is literally like a spreadsheet where every single cell has a number in it that represents the brightness of that one pixel. To get to 3 dimensions, we can actually go in 2 different directions, which is pretty cool. For a color image, we just stack 3 of those 2D grids on top of each other, one for red, one for green, and one for blue. But 3D can also represent physical space. An MRI scan is a perfect example. It's just a stack of 2D grayscale images, which, when you put them all together, create a 3D volume of the body. Each data point is now a voxel. Think of it as a 3D pixel. So what's the 4th dimension? Time. A video is just a sequence of 3D color images, frames, shown one after another. In the same way, a functional MRI, or an fMRI, is a series of 3D brain scans captured over time. This lets scientists see not just the brain's structure, but how its activity actually changes from one moment to the next. As you can probably imagine, a 4D array of high-detail numbers gets incredibly large incredibly fast. Storing and sending all that data is a massive challenge, and that's where the art of compression comes into play. Compression is all about finding clever ways to represent the exact same information using fewer bits. But it's always a trade-off. And the key question you have to ask is, are you using this data for super precise scientific analysis, where every single number has to be perfect, or is it for entertainment, where good enough for the human eye is, well, good enough? This leads to 2 main flavors of compression. Lossless is basically like a zip file. It shrinks the file down, but when you decompress it, you get back every single original bit of data, perfectly intact. This is absolutely critical for scientific data. Lossy compression, on the other hand, strategically throws away information it thinks you won't perceive anyway. It's how JPEGs and streaming videos get those incredibly small file sizes. And we see these trade-offs in action with file formats we use every single day.
The GIF, all the way from 1987, uses lossless compression, but it's limited to just 256 colors, which is why it's great for simple animations. The JPG uses lossy compression to handle millions of colors, making it perfect for photographs. And PNG is a more modern format that gives you the best of both worlds: lossless compression with millions of colors and full transparency.
Now for video, it gets one layer more complex. That .mp4 file you have, that's not the compression itself, it's the container. Think of it like a box, and that box can hold a video stream, an audio stream, maybe some subtitles. The actual compression method that's used on the video inside the box is called the codec, which stands for coder-decoder. H.264 is a really common codec you'd find inside an MP4 container.
So far, pretty much everything we've talked about, images, video, MRI scans, has been based on a grid of samples, pixels or voxels. This is called raster graphics. But there is a completely different approach.
Instead of storing a grid of colored dots, vector graphics store a set of mathematical instructions. Draw a line from point A to point B, make a circle this big with this color. And because it's just instructions, you can scale it to any size, from a tiny icon to a giant billboard, and it will always be perfectly sharp. It's why fonts and company logos are almost always vector graphics.
And this same exact principle applies in 3 dimensions. A 3D model isn't a collection of 3D pixels, nope. Instead, it's a file that describes a surface as a mesh of simple shapes, usually tiny little triangles. This vector-like approach is exactly what makes it possible to send a model to a 3D printer or to move it around smoothly in a VR headset.
And the technology for capturing the real world this way is advancing like crazy. Photogrammetry cleverly stitches together hundreds of 2D photos. LiDAR, which you might even have on your phone, uses lasers to measure distance with incredible precision. And a brand new, cutting-edge technique called Gaussian splatting can create these stunningly photorealistic 3D scenes from millions of tiny colored particles.
Okay, so we've covered the theory, from pixels to vectors, from 1D sound all the way to 4D video. But how do we actually work with all this data? This is where we get to move from theory to a practical digital workbench. And this is the beautiful, unifying secret to all of this. In a powerful tool like MATLAB, which literally stands for Matrix Laboratory, all of these different signals we've been talking about are just arrays of numbers. A sound file, a picture of a bird, an MRI of a brain, at the end of the day, they're all just matrices that you can add, subtract, multiply, and manipulate with math.
And this just opens up a whole world of possibilities. You can load that 1D audio vector and mess with its sampling weight to change the playback speed. You could take a 2D image of a head and multiply it by a simple black and white mask image to perfectly isolate just the brain. You can pull apart a 3D color image into its separate red, green, and blue channels. Or you can loot through the time dimension of a 4D fMRI scan to create an animation of brain activity. It's all just matrix math. So, we've gone from the analog world to a list of numbers. And from that list of numbers to sound, images, and entire virtual worlds. These really are the fundamental building blocks. So the question that's left is, with these powerful tools in more hands than ever before, what new and unimaginable realities are going to be built next?